Hey, welcome back to another episode of Projecting Grandeur. I'm your host, Ron Dichter, and I'm pumped for today's episode. I've got a guy that I've known for a long time, and I've seen his journey go from entry-level hire to executive to CEO, and now to purpose-led entrepreneur. Clay Harris joins us. He started his journey at a company called WorkSmart straight out of school, which I'm going to dive into. But Clay, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk about what you've been up to and also your new role as an EOS implementer.
Thanks, Ron. It's good to be here. It's good to see you, man. It's been fun kind of sharing the journey with you.
Absolutely. Well, I get to see all your cool stuff, and I have a little bit of LinkedIn envy because I like the posts that you put out there. So we'll share your contact information at the end here. But let's go way back. Let's go back to the very beginning. Let's talk about when you had that first interview at that first job at WorkSmart straight out of school. What ultimately, did you decide to take that role, and what were some of those early things that you think still shape your approach in kind of business today?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was still in school. So like, there's no out of school. There was, I think similar to you, we were all still in school, and it was the spring of 2001. And the dot-com bubble had burst, and our common connection, a different Ron Unger, who has an entrepreneurial heart as well, had decided to start a company and called WorkSmart, and had a bunch of us kind of come try out, right? And so like, we were 19, 20, 21. Ron was older because he's always older, but 21, 22 years old. And my buddy was like, hey, I'm going to go talk to these guys about a startup. And this was 2001, which is when like startup culture was cool, like, remember?
Oh,
and
yeah.
I guess it still is, but when you're 20, it's especially cool. And so I went in and I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds like fun. I got nothing to do. And so I walked in there. I remember because they made fun of me for a long time. I was wearing Birkenstocks and, probably had done some late night activities the night before. Anyway, walked in, rolled in, talked to those guys, and they're like, you want to try it? And I think literally they would have hired anyone that came in off the street because they were just looking for bodies. And that turned into kind of what we thought was kind of like a summer kind of experiment. And next thing you know, it's a 25-year ride. So yeah, that's the beginnings in the basement of the business school at UNC in Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
It's crazy. Well, you didn't just, get that entry-level job and eventually become, on the management team and executive team. You became the CEO. And a lot of that growth was under your leadership. Like, I mean, what do you give most of that credit for? Like, how did you get that kind of trajectory?
I don't know. What is the answer? There's not. Part of it is luck. You get into positions and you call it luck, but you got to make your own luck a little bit. But you get in the right place at the right time. When I described the ride at WorkSmart, which continues this day, those guys are still doing a great job over there. But when you think about, I wonder if there's some parallels in your story in the payment processing world. But at WorkSmart, we came into this world where in 2001 there was this transition happening from computers being a little bit unapproachable because of expense and all those sorts of things to being a little bit more affordable. The internet broadband was becoming more, my kids right now laugh because we didn't have internet in my dorm room, right? Like, can you imagine? But
Yeah.
that computers were more expensive. Internet was becoming more pervasive. The world had just had this experience of Y2K, remember? Like, where all the people who thought that they knew how to like give advice and consult and fix things had thrown their hat in the ring, and most of them just took your money and didn't really do much, right? And so the world had this experience of being like, man, the people who build our computers don't really know how to help us very well. They can fix technical problems, but they aren't giving us great advice. And so all that kind of put together created an opportunity, which we kind of leveraged that WorkSmart to create a business that was first about helping as a B2B, helping our business clients succeed, and technologies happen to be the way to do it. And the world wanted it, right? And so we So that's one thing. The timing was right. And then the second thing was like, man, we were just hustlers, right? We sold. Like we were all out picking up new clients all the time. The focus of the company was picking up new clients. And we provided great service on the back end, but you're out there, shaking the trees, right? Like, I mean, we when we first started, we got in trouble one time because we'd all read that book. I bet you read it too, Guerrilla Marketing or whatever, when it first came out. Yeah. And so we had put political signs, but instead of political messages, they were like, call WorkSmart. I think it probably said $40 an hour or something on it. And we put those all over town until the town called us and like, hey, for every sign that you put out, we're fining you a couple $1,000, so you need to get them. You have 24 hours. And we didn't know where we had put them, so we just drove around frantically. But that kind of stuff, you just can do it when you're 20.
Absolutely. Well, the whole concept of this show is projecting grandeur, which is really becoming the person that you can be before you become, actually that person. And I have to think, as you transition from, entry-level employee to management to executive to CEO, like what does projecting grandeur mean to you in that evolution?
The ability to show up authentically and make a difference in people's lives, right? I think is the thing that kind of resonates with me, and it certainly, the bigger and more important the title that you have, the more kind of like amplification happens, just because people see what you do and say kind of with more oomph.
Yeah.
But whether you have kids, I have kids, that my number one thing that I want for my kids is to show up in the world as exactly who they want to be, and recognize that that's a journey that doesn't have an end, right? And so when I think about like what living, like kind of the grandest life, the most lavish life, it's not about dollars, it's not about you know the trappings. It's like actually being able to show up to your loved ones, to your coworkers, to the people that you work with and for, uh, as yourself, and having them love and accept you, and do all those sorts of things. And generally, like the good stuff, the fun stuff follows. And the folks who, and my own personal, the places in my life where I've like not been that are the places where I've had the most hardship and had the most failings, when you're kind of not living in that way. And so, uh, CEO or not, showing up authentically, giving love, receiving love, showing people that we're here to celebrate together, we're here to overcome obstacles together, we're here to like kind of encourage each other and be there when it doesn't work, is what it's about. You know what I'm saying?
I know exactly what you're saying. So let me ask you, this is kind of a follow-up to that then. As you think about, kind of that moment in time, right? Because obviously you weren't hired as the CEO, day one. You became that person. But was there a moment in time where maybe you were thinking to yourself, am I really ready for this role? And am I going to be, to your point, authentic and genuine as I get into that role? Like, when did you realize, like, I am ready, I can be that guy? And WorkSmart go to a huge company. Like, how did you know that time was your time ready for the taking?
Well, some just like just like the success of WorkSmart, timing is the thing. So when Ron taps you on the shoulder and is like, "Hey, this is the opportunity. Do you step up or step away?" And you just kind of have to make a decision. And just like I said, it's not a video game, and I'm sure there's a gazillion different ways to approach this. But for me, it's always a work in progress. And so I don't know that anyone ever gets rid of all of the voices in the back of their head saying like, I'm not sure. Like I think if people are kind of really able to be honest about that, they're probably always feeling that in some way. Maybe, hopefully, the voices get quieter. You figure out how to like say hi to them and let them go away faster, right? But I don't know that it ever goes away completely. But I'll share a story. So Ron, when we started WorkSmart, IT consulting shop, really a IT like help desk service provider, right? Like at the beginning, we all wore ties every day, even like button downs and ties. Even our techs, the guys who are crawling under your desk, reconnecting your printer, had a tie. They had to clip on, and at some point we loosened that up. We had no ties, but still button downs. And I think COVID made everything different. But the but Ron wore suit jackets almost every day, and 100% wore them to every single staff meeting, right? And Ron is like more straight laced than me. I think he would say that. I would say that, and it's authentic for him. And so the first staff meeting after he wasn't the CEO and I was, and maybe the first two or three, I was wearing a suit jacket to those meetings, and that's not really my style. And my coworker Alexis said to me, she's like, Clay, like, you're the boss. You're not trying to pretend to be Ron as the boss. And that was like one of those things where it's like I knew that and had thought about it, but also like was just like kind of worried, you know?
Yeah.
And that little like statement kind of unlocked this idea that like, oh yeah, this authenticity thing matters. This kind of showing up as yourself matters. And it was really helpful. So shout out to Alexis for that
That's awesome.
reminder. But one moment.
Yeah, that all right. All right. So let's kind of take full circle here. So you grew from starting employee all the way up to CEO, and then you had that moment where something, that voice, whatever it was, and I want to know what it was, basically said, "My time here is done, and I need to go do something new." And you decided to leave WorkSmart. How did you know it was time to make that leap?
Yeah, I think there's a couple different answers to that. And they're both kind of ingredients, right? One of them is that we had at some point, and I couldn't put a complete finger on it, but those voices that you mentioned started being like, oh, this isn't working the way it used to work, right? Like the way that I thought it worked wasn't working the way it worked. And that kind of showed up in a bunch of different ways. But one of them is like we kind of stalled a little bit, right? Like we grew, and COVID for all IT businesses we grew significantly, like right time, right place. And that really helped us in our growth. So that was one kind of thing that happened. Also, we had grown through acquisition, right? And the other thing that happened around COVID is that because all these technical companies, that became a little bit harder for us, right, to kind of do ourselves, which is a way that we had gotten a bunch of deals done. And so that was one thing. It just became a little bit harder for me. And when it was hard professionally, it was hard personally. And so I remember sitting down with my partners and saying like, man, this is tough. I don't know. And we were like, all right, here's the plan for the next year. Let's give it another shot. Let's see if we can kind of figure this out. And so that was one thing. And so that was the internal part. And then there was another part where when that didn't work, I was getting in the way. And that feedback didn't come from inside. It came from outside. I was getting in the way of the company continuing to grow. Part of that stalling was on me. And like, I was just kind of stuck in the ways that it had worked for 24 years and wasn't able to like kind of see the forest for the trees. And so it became clear, not only to me, but to other people, it was time to go. And that was like a hard pill to swallow, but it was the right pill to swallow. And it's interesting, not to jump ahead, but as we were kind of thinking about the next person to run WorkSmart, and you built this company, we're 20 something million dollars of revenue, 100 something employees, it's fun ride. And you talk about all these issues, and then you meet somebody who's done that next leap over and over, and you're like, man, we just never figured this out. And they're like, well, did you try this, and this? And you're like, what? You just have this in your back pocket? And so those sorts of things are just eye-opening, reassuring things that like that feeling that you had, it wasn't just you. It was kind of like you just didn't have it. And that was it remains like not like kind of like I'm not like walking around being like, man, I couldn't figure that last thing out. Hooray. It's still like one of those things that I wish I had figured it out, but I didn't. And so yeah.
Well, so let's kind of shift to what you do now. So EOS, just I know about it, and I know it's about structure and vision, but I want to just take a quick second and explain EOS to our viewers that don't know what that is. And as you think about kind of, your personal experiences as CEO, how did that really help shape kind of this next chapter for you?
Yeah, sure. So EOS is the entrepreneurial operating system, and it's really simple. Sometimes when people hear that, they think it's a technology or something they download on their phone and helps their business run. It's not. It's really just a set of simple tools and disciplines that businesses can use, leverage in their business to help it just go a little bit further, a little bit faster. And we actually implemented it in WorkSmart in 2013 when we were 30 employees or so, $5 or so million of revenue. And it was one of the things, not the only thing for sure. It's just an ingredient, but one of the things that helped us kind of grow quickly over the next 10 or so years to go almost quadruple in size. And so when I was kind of recognizing that probably the next run for WorkSmart would be led for someone else, I was forced me to be a little bit introspective about the things that I love. And like one of the things that I enjoyed most about that journey at WorkSmart was like figuring out like there are ways to unlock the human energy that aren't just like only require me to just pour all the energy into it. There are systems and processes and disciplines that can help them be self-sufficient. And so that was, and a big part of that for us was the EOS. And so I became last summer a EOS Implementer, where I'm just helping do what we did at WorkSmart for the last 10 years, do that at other places. And that's really fun because I'm helping people do that same thing, that $3, $4, $5 million revenue to 20, 25, $30 million revenue. And they're just all on that same ride, and I'm really good at it. And it's super fun, you know? Yeah.
That's cool. So thinking about going back to Projecting Grandeur, like being in the company, like as the CEO versus coaching CEOs, coaching leaders, coaching executives. Like what does Projecting Grandeur look like differently as a coach than it does as the actual executive?
Oh man, I'm laughing because I bet this is true for you too, Ron. When you go and talk to a business owner now about six pack, and they're like, "Well, here are all the problems. Here are all the problems that I got, and I'm special. I know that no one's like me, and the only thing that you hear in your head is you're just like everybody else. But I recognize that like the last mile of your problem is super duper unique, and it's mainly your whatever's in your head, you know."
Yeah.
And so the thing about getting great, the thing about projecting grandeur that shows up for me in this world is that I hate to keep kind of saying the same thing, but like that thing where you walk in a room of entrepreneurial leaders and they're stuck on something. And mainly the stuckness is that they're in their own head. They're getting in their own way, right? They just haven't figured out, they haven't gotten that aha moment where like, oh, of course, that's the thing. And all it takes is a little bit of grease or whatever, right? A little push or asking the right question or two or 25 questions to get them there. And once you get there, to watch like the ferocity with which entrepreneurs attack a problem when they know how to do it is so invigorating.
Yeah.
Once they, you know what I'm saying? Because like no one's in that room because they've chosen the easy path. If you started a business and you're a leader in an entrepreneurial business, you know you're tackling some stuff. And once you get onto the meat of it, you can't get them off. And so I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, okay, so let me double click into this just a little bit. So thinking of that shift of, being the one that has to deal with those hard questions to now coaching people who have to deal with those hard questions. Cause you're right. Like when you're in it, and,
Yeah.
and you live that world. So has that shaped the way, you've kind of done things differently? Because I can just picture, you've been such a great leader at WorkSmart. How do you apply that with also helping them to see that path, right? Because you can't just tell them the path, because you're right, the last mile is unique. Like, how has that changed, being the one in charge to being the one that's coaching the one in charge, and just overall leadership, like that, just mishing it all together?
Some of this I learned from our buddy Ron. It's just like you just ask a bunch of questions, and if you don't get the answer, you like keep asking questions because so when I'm in the session room with folks, you're 100% right. Three roles kind of as the outsider now that I think about and embrace often, which is one, you got to teach. And this is a lot of what we do as leaders. It's just like if you're the CEO and you try to teach a lesson, like sometimes people have filters because they have to interact with you on 8 different things. And so sometimes I'm effective as a coach because I'm just a new person saying it, right? So I recognize that teaching. Then the second thing, you facilitate, because 99% of the time the answer's in the room. You just got to get it out of them. And so when I'm facilitating, I'm asking a bunch of questions. Like every once in a while, they need to find an outside resource. But 99% of the time, the answer's in the room. And that's because the right answer is always the authentic answer. right? And if you tell them what it is, it's not authentic. So you got to get them to come to it. And then the last thing is coach, teach, facilitate, and coach. And sometimes you got to tell them what play to run, but you don't do it all the way to the end. You're like, hey, listen, here's the concept of the play, but the execution is up to them. And so you kind of do that last, but like teach, facilitate, and coach. And quite honestly, that's not that much different than what I did when I was in the business at the end, right? I was kind of removed from the day-to-day a lot. And so I was teaching, facilitating, and coaching. But these days they gotta walk away holding the accountability for it getting done. And so that's a difference now. And to be blunt, that's one of the things I miss. I miss kind of not only doing those things, but being like, all right, if it doesn't happen, it's on me. And like, we're going, let's go, but it's a work in progress, just like anything else.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think one of the things that I find most admirable about you is that courage to, know when, your time is done and be able to walk away from something that you spent 2.5 decades building. Like, there's probably a lot of people out there listening that are asking themselves, like, I think I want to go do this other thing. I don't know how to decouple myself or leave, or I'm afraid to. Like, what advice would you give to somebody in that situation where they've got a thing, but they just don't have the passion anymore and they want to go do this other thing? Like, how do they make that leap?
You said it's a leap. And so just like anything, you got to jump, but you got to listen to yourself. And so, I probably waited a little bit too long because that passion wasn't there. And so if folks are in that boat, I urge them to like talk to the people that they care about at work, at home, and like get their feedback, because it's showing up somehow. Like you might think that it's not, but I promise it is. And get their feedback and then be smart about it. And for some folks, it means cold turkey. For some folks, it's graduated over time. For some folks, it might be a little bit of both for a while. But do what's right for you, and based on showing up authentically and doing the things that you care about. But I'll tell you, there's a real kind of freedom once you find that again of the thing that you love doing, and you get to spend your time doing it. That doesn't feel like going to work every day. When you're just kind of out helping and loving what you do, whether that's starting a new company or doing what I'm doing with coaching or whatever it is. Once you find that again, that thing that you had when you started the company, that like, that joie de vivre of going in and just feeling it, man, you can find that again. Sometimes people think they can't find it again, but you can, and it's pretty dang cool. So it's out there, I promise.
Yeah, I like that. And I like the use of the French joie de vivre. I can't spell it in a Jeopardy question. So
I can't either. And my favorite episode there's a podcast, Armchair Expert, and there's one episode on that where they're talking about that, and they just crack up and crack up and crack up. And it's the only reason I know that phrase is because they just laugh about it for like an hour. So
I love it. Well, listen, Clay, I think you are an inspiration to a lot of us in thinking of like the ability to, just reinvent ourselves and go for passion and really focus on purpose. And I just applaud you for it. I'm excited to watch this journey and really just appreciate you coming in. So thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, man, that's super fun. Thanks, Ron.
Absolutely. And to everyone else, remember, keep projecting your grandeur. You are only as good as you can tell yourself you are. So don't sell yourself short, because you got some amazing stuff in there. We'll catch you next episode. Take care.